Welcome to Around the Empire. I'm your host, Joanne. Kelley Lane is co-hosting today. This is a fully independent podcast. Lend your support, patreon.com/aroundtheempire, paypal.me/aroundtheempirepod. Also, please like, share, and subscribe on YouTube. Today we have a great group discussion. We're joined by the hosts of the Convo Couch show, Fiorella Isabel and Craig, aka Pasta Jardula. We discuss corrupt voting systems and party machines, rigging the Democratic primary elections, and signs of rigging in the 2020 elections by a bipartisan establishment, irregularities and challenges to the 2020 election results, and more. Craig, Pasta Jardula, and Fiorella Isabel are the hosts of the Convo Couch show, an independent media show focused on politics, rooted in progressivism, and one that strives to stand up for the little guy against the machine. They've done extensive work with candidates and investigation of elections and election systems. We recorded this on November 18th, 2020. Okay, so we have a great group here today. We have the hosts of the Convo Couch, Fiorella Isabel and Craig Pasta Jardula, and Kelley Lane is co-hosting tonight. And we're going to talk about elections and what we're seeing, election fraud, election integrity, and just kind of try to make sense out of, I know I'm pretty overwhelmed by all this, but first let me welcome you to the show. And if you want, maybe just give our audience, if they're not familiar with you, just give them a little bit of an intro, about yourselves.
I'm Fiorella. I am part of the Convo Couch. This is Pasta, and we really have been following election integrity for years now. We followed it to a T when this past primary between Bernie Sanders and Biden, and of course everybody else happened. And we saw, I was in Iowa when the shenanigans were going down. We were looking at the machines in New Hampshire. We also saw the difference between that and the Nevada caucus, which had hand counted paper ballots. And we noticed a trend. We've had several election integrity activists come on our show and talk about the exit polls, but also talk about the machines, et cetera. And we're seeing right now the California Democratic Party commit election fraud via non-transparent methods, via keeping information away from people demanding a 1% audit to look into to see the count. And where it's happening everywhere. And I am very saddened that it has come to this point where we have politicized the issue of election integrity as a right-wing talking point. And a lot of that isn't just by liberals. It's being done also by the progressives on the left. So
I think one of the reasons we probably decided to start the show was not only to get like candidates on that were getting shunned and shut out by the mainstream media, but was also to kind of put these elections and bring them into light.
yeah.
We wanted to talk about election integrity and candidates and foreign policy when we started the show. And, we're just more than just people who cover elections. We study them. We're activists. Like, Kelley understands the whole game. We understand what's going on. We understand the systemic issues that we have. And that's why we get to guests we do guest and talk about the things we do talk about it, because it's, to me, it's the number one issue. We can't get anything we want unless we get this kicked right in the butt. And, it was pretty obvious that something was going on in 2016 and it stunk to high heaven. So, when Bernie Sanders came out there and said, you guys got to run for this and that and run for this and that, we also said, hey, yeah, we have to be the fourth branch of government and start an independent media show where we can elevate these candidates. But we also got to highlight the problems that really exist within our election system, because they are bad. And if we don't, like I said, if we don't kick this in the butt, it doesn't mean nothing. It means nothing for anything we want. Excuse me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, my introduction really was, I was working with CFAR and CWAC, which are candidate organizations. CWAC is a anti-corruption contract, and CFAR is a progressive platform contract. But, I watched what was going on with Bernie in the 2016 primary and thinking to myself, well, surely this is going to be on the news, all this funny stuff that's going on, voters getting booted off the rolls, and none of it was there. And so that was my first clue, like, oh, we don't have a free press anymore, okay? And then as I got more involved, and then I ended up going to a couple of different conferences. I went to Unrig the System, which felt like a Democratic Party performance thing. And I couldn't believe it that all these election integrity activists that I met, most of them were a bit older than me and had been involved since the 2000 election. And in fact, I sat down at the table to talk with one of them, and I started talking about the 2016 primary and specifically Tim Canova's race. And did he know about what had happened there, the ballot destruction and everything? And I just get these blank looks, like they have no idea. Because I think, we can say maybe there's something funny going on with some people, but I think with a lot of them, it's just the lens that they are looking at this through. They came in 2000, and it was a different ball game there. And maybe some of them are more leaning towards the establishment Democrats. A lot of them were Hillary supporters, and they saw Bernie as this interloper. He's an independent, and they just either turned a blind eye or just didn't know about it. But that was my first clue, like something is not right here, because they're not seeing what I'm seeing, and it's right here. We had all this evidence. So that's kind of how I came into it.
Yeah, so I mean, that's really valuable because it's pretty overwhelming right now for people who, like, I've been in touch with Kelley for a long time. And so it sort of in real time, she was telling me some things that were happening with the Canova when she was on the road and things like that. And I watched Pasta and Fiorella when you were like assessing the new systems in California and that kind of thing. So, but once the election happens, I felt completely certain that there was something really bad going on, but I was afraid it was confirmation bias because I thought there was going to be something.
Right.
So, but then, it's like it comes in so fast, the information comes in so fast. And this time, like before, it seemed to have been easier to find people who were, putting reports out on Twitter at least, or people who were writing more what I felt were honest and genuine accounts of what's going on. But right now, there's something different. We're just getting flooded by so much junk out there, and the media took a stance right from the start that there was no fraud. And they put this out in headlines, they put this out in statements. There was no possible way that they could have known whether there was fraud or not. They started that, I think, from the very first day. Plus all the predictive stuff that had come out, like there's going to be a red mirage and then a blue wave, or whatever they called it. So I thought first, it's important that you already talked about the fact that you were involved and watching this and what your thoughts were on the 2016 primaries, because you have to remember that all four of us come to it with that perspective. We were closely watching the 2016 primaries. We watched the lawsuit that happened afterwards. We were watching the WikiLeaks stuff closely, all of us. So we were already, I mean, you could say jaded, but it's not really jaded. Like we were informed. We knew what was going on. We knew what this party was willing to do. And so when the 2020 primaries came around, along with all of the just everything thrown up in the air because of the coronavirus lockdowns, and every law was changed and flooding the place with mail-in ballots, people getting multiple ballots, people getting, 2 or 3 previous residents at that place, the ballots for them, and, just everything. And it's very hard to sort through it. So I saw that you've done, work, but all of you have done work with the election integrity groups. But I think that one of the interviews that I saw that you did was with David Webb, who's, expert with election systems, and also with Benny Smith, who's now the controversial Shiva presentation and all that. And I just wondered what you guys maybe want to share with this audience about, what you've culled from that, what you've learned from that.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, yeah, like you said, we're informed, and the way we saw everything play out, and I just really kind of Well, to unpack this and really explain what this is all about too, and what we're facing today as this pushback against the Shivas and the Benny Smiths and the whole, the open source community, or the checks and balances with the software and whatnot, versus the reason why we're having such a pushback from progressives too, because it all does stem from the year 2000, and all these people that were involved. It was a very racist friggin' thing that the Bush clan was able to pull off, and his minions, and that's a political dynasty, and that's important to remember. But that cross-reference list he created in Florida in the year 2000 was racially motivated, taking people away who were going to vote for Democrat at that time, because it was more evident that Gore and the Democrats were going to get way more people of color votes than Bush, who Kanye West said on Saturday Night Live, George Bush doesn't care about black people, but that cross-reference list, fast forward to the year 2020 right now, you hear this same type of rhetoric where, the Republicans are doing racist things by purging people of color off the list. Therefore, the real story is that Trump and his minions, which Trump doesn't have that political dynasty and power to even pull it off. And that's the reason, that's the real story. So what they're doing is they're triggering emotions again from progressives who are really buying this. Once again, everything is racially motivated from the white man trying to put people down, and that's the real problem. And I'm not saying that problem doesn't exist, but this election, clearly, we all know this was an election where we have to question that there were too many votes casted, not enough votes casted. I mean, these are crazy, crazy, crazy numbers, like Wisconsin, 92% and whatnot. So when you plug into that whole community and you have these group of activists that were stem from the year 2000, and the racist tactics that were used, now kind of playing that same card today. And actually today, it's just a distraction, because we're not looking at the real problems that exist and the information that we've gathered simply from the systemic ways these elections are run. And if you just look at the framework, you got to say, hey, we got to stop, unpack, and we have to change this. But it's crazy because they've been able to move people into that Democratic Party who are progressives, and actually support the same tactics that were used against their candidate twice.
Well, it took one election cycle, in my opinion, to turn progressives into neoliberals, because what they were able to do is put into this idea that we are still living in a left-right paradigm, which that isn't the paradigm. That's not the fight right here. The fight is between the oligarchy and the people. And if you don't see that by now, this election should make it abundantly clear. I mean, the fact is that we are seeing the merger of the NSA with the CIA, with the security state agencies, as well as the military industrial complex. All of them line up behind Joe Biden. We saw it from the beginning when it was Bernie Sanders in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, and how the media was manipulated to vilify him. That carried on to 2020. It in fact infected his campaign with a bunch of establishment lobbyists and consultants in his campaign specifically. And then that also kind of carried out by Bernie Sanders not talking about the election problem at all, not even mentioning it. He had the opportunity to do so. He didn't. And we saw, once again, the mainstream media malign him, vilify him, no matter what he did. And now we've seen the complete progressive movement, even with the AOC and the squad, shift into cheering that Joe Biden is going to become the president, even as he's filling his cabinet with a multitude of people who are corporate lobbyists, Wall Street, people who were detrimental to a lot of the working class. And so what we're seeing here is that they are trying to make election integrity this political issue that is only conspiracy theory. Now, we had advanced on talking about election integrity issues a little bit since 2000, but what people haven't realized is that Republicans and Democrats like Bush and the Obamas and the Clintons are all friends. And this is no longer the clear cut left versus right. This is like, there's a reason George Bush and the McCains have endorsed the Joe Biden as president. Like there's a reason that's happening, and it's not because they changed ideology. It is because of the money and the power, and where these loyalties lie are always going to be them against us. And so that's what people have to realize, that this is no longer the fight versus left versus right. This is us, and we have to hold these people accountable. There is no democracy in this country right now as it stands, and we are seeing a lot of our own people pretty much get sucked into that because of the Trump derangement syndrome, because of the fact that the media wasted so much time making Trump the villain, And people didn't realize that the reason you hate Donald Trump so much is because he shows the ugliness in America, and Biden is a friendly fascist face. And so that is a lot of cognitive dissonance that we're going to have to get over. But you mentioned Benny, and I wanted to just mention really quick that he was the way he framed it was, look, like, it's a program. He's a programmer. He's a software guy. That's what it is. That's what it is. It doesn't matter how you feel. It's a numbers thing. It's a statistic thing. You can't deny that the glitch thing is a complete, like, total, like, fabrication. There are no glitches. Like, people write these programs to make them do what they want to do, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the glitch was an interesting. After that, it seemed to me like they started saying clerical error, because at least when there are humans doing the counting and the tabulating, you can blame it on a human, right? They're tired, they're counting all night. But no, I'm in software too, and I agree with Penny on that. They don't, like, choose to glitch every once in a while. I mean, sometimes there are bugs in software that are intermittent, that are hard to reproduce, because that's what you have to do when you're trying to fix it. You got to, like, figure out how it happens, look at it over and over and over. And sometimes you have these intermittent issues. But no, not the way that one was explained. And yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
Well, the bottom line is that all of these machines, as we all well understand now, have proprietary software. It's a black box. The unfortunate truth is just we don't know what the real answer is of who is the winner. And that is just absurd these days in this country, that we can't know that. And so I think it's going to take, changing that system into voting machines. I think it's very scary to think about it being part of critical infrastructure where they make it all uniform, across the country. But if it's done in a way, and I want to share with you guys a system, I'm hoping a guy that you'll have on your show, his name is John Papa, and he's worked for Oracle's national security group. Don't let that scare you, for years. And he's come up with a system. He's not trying to sell anything. It's a system that any voting machine vendor could make. It would save a lot of money, but they could make it to these specs. And he claims it is hack proof, and he welcomes any and all criticism or suggestions to his system of how to make it better, or if anyone sees any errors. And he wants the people to own it. So I think we're going to have something where we push back and maybe get candidates on board fighting for this, because it's going to take more than just a couple of voices. It's going to take many, I think, in unison, because we are up against that, as Glenn Greenwald thankfully came out when what happened at The Intercept with them trying to squash his story about the Biden family. He came out and said, it's this union of power between the mainstream media, the Democratic Party, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and that is a very powerful force. So we're up against, we don't have fair elections, and we do not have a free press, period. And that's a very scary. So it's a huge.
I was going to say, the thing, just a big piggyback on what you're saying right now, when you first opened up your statement there, was, and it's something that Benny said that just drives me crazy. It's proprietary software with public funding. Proprietary software with public funding. You buy it, you own it, but you can't see it. You can't look at it. And that's why I think the language is important. We talk about black box voting. I've been saying we have systemic issues with our election system, because I know everybody, a lot of burners, they talk about, Medicare for all, Green New Deal, and they also talk about the systemic prison industrial complex we have, systemic racism. So I've been trying to use words like that to get people involved, to get their mind there. And also a cute thing today was we found out that the Republicans are calling it hammer and scorecard. We're like, yeah, we've been calling that fraction magic for years, and how that can go on. But yes, I think the language is important. I think the people we put forth are important. I was very disturbed to see that Jesse Ventura didn't think it was, rigged, by saying there's 5 million more votes he's got than you, and you think it's rigged. I'm like, Jesse, he's got 5 million more votes in California alone. That means he doesn't, the establishment, and with this proprietary software, black box voting that we can't see, it's not going to take much to flip it in the other areas to swing it to Joe Biden.
It's just this idea that means that there was no fraud, that 5 million more votes means like, no, there's that's too many votes. That's just not realizing what's going on here. That's not realizing that we have people in this country who are very powerful, who literally manipulate everything and everyone to fit a certain narrative. So that is still believing that there's democracy in this country. Like, if you think like that those votes are real votes, then you don't understand what's going on. And unfortunately, like I said, that's a lot of cognitive dissonance that we're going to have to move past, because people can't fight against against the system if they don't believe that, like, if they don't first admit there's a problem. It's like you need to admit that there's a problem in order to actually get through this. But right now we have a lot of people still wanting to pretend that even though we topple governments all over the world, even though, you know, we're going after Julian Assange, who's not even an American, who's Australian, for doing journalism, and even though we refuse to give our own people healthcare during a pandemic, and even though we're going through this economic disaster, etc., and we have the largest military in the world, and we are a country full of corrupt oligarchs, that somehow, even in spite of all that, our elections are fine and democratic. I mean, that is some mental gymnastics you have to do to believe that.
And the lack of actually admitting that you have a problem is stems from a lack of understanding of the system itself. They don't understand how the system works. When you tell them proprietary software, now everybody's screaming Dominion. You're like, that's an old name. ES&S, Hard, Smartmatic. We know this years ago. We understand how it worked. There is a lack of understanding of the systemic issues that are in front of us when it comes to our elections. It's not as easy as just counting 1, 2, 3, 4. There's all these other hurdles in place, whether it comes to inflation of ballots, taking people off the rolls, making these lines so long that it disenfranchises our young people for the future, to the tabulation that what goes in, we don't know is necessarily true of what comes out.
Yeah, exactly. The Dominion thing. So yeah, this is not a new name. Oh, first of all, you talked about the proprietary software publicly funded, but let's remember the other aspect to it. You know, political officials own parts of it. They can own shares in it. So, and you know that, like, the decision about which voting systems to implement, particularly in big cities, but really everywhere, it can be tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, right? That have been spent. So there's that aspect to it too. Like, changing these things, yeah, you might get them changed, but it might just be some other crony linked business that, you know, that wins the fight over who's going to get, you know, to feed at the trough. So that's and the other issue is that an administration that was elected by software that had, you know, that has big fraud problems. Now, of course, it's not just the software, right? As Craig just mentioned, there are lots of different ways that you can manipulate an election, but you're asking them to bring in new, you know, to help bring in new systems based on the ones that were used to elect you. And if you use the fraud argument, I mean, there's just no incentive for them to work on that. It's a pretty daunting problem. But with the Dominion thing, so we have right now, we have a contested election, and we have a number of Trump's got basically a pittance of a legal team. He's completely outgunned in the lawfare, it looks like. And I don't know how many people they have, like, on the ground. They talked about 1,000 depositions or something like that, and they needed another 1,000. Now, Sidney Powell went on and said she's got this, you know, giant thing that they're going to release, and that she referred to the amount of, she said, talked about whistleblowers at Dominion. She talked about, you know, for millions, but then she reduced it down to 100,000 people contacting them with information. She said it's like a fire hose. I hope she's got people vetting that information first off. But what are your thoughts from what you've seen on that situation?
You want me to go first?
Oh, okay. Well, you know, a lot of people just all outright dismiss what she says because she's on Trump's team. So number one, like, I think we need to move past that. I mean, she is one of the top lawyers on his team, so we do have to look at what she's saying. She's bringing up information, like, as Pasta said, that a lot of us in the progressive or election integrity activist community already knew about the Dominion issues. She did bring up some good points about how Elizabeth Warren and people like Amy Klobuchar were bringing up these concerns regarding Dominion just 1 year ago, and how, of course, Texas refused to certify these machines because they were found completely unreliable. Those are things that are very true. She's also bringing up the same type of language shift, which I've been demanding from the right from the start. Stop calling it voter fraud. This is election fraud because it's done at a mass scale. And that's something that the right keeps, like, literally a lot of people keep saying voter fraud interchangeably. It is a completely different thing. Like, let's get that straightened out right away. Like, election fraud is it's a massive thing. A voter fraud would be an individual doing it. It's a felony. You're not really seeing individuals do it unless, of course, somebody at a higher end, whether it's the legislation, whether it's a state party, etc., then that would make it election fraud. And so when the right says things like voter fraud, it diminishes their credibility. And then the liberals can come in and say, oh, there's no such thing as voter fraud, blah, blah, blah. And so that's one thing that I noticed that she was adapting, and which I think it's a good thing. I do think that, though, they are up against a lot of power. Like, and I think both people on the Democrat side and the Republican side have a vested interest in not letting people see these into these machines. I mean, you can look back to every case before that. You get close enough and they do not let you see inside these machines, because I think if Trump were able to uncover everything he and his team say they're going to uncover, it is a lot of people would be exposed on both sides of the aisle. And so I think they're up against, Goliath at this point. Like, and he doesn't have very many friends in DC. They're pretty much alone. He doesn't, the state, the deep state, whether it's the NSA, the CIA, the military industrial complex specifically, they don't think that Trump is hawkish enough. They don't think that Trump is more as easily controlled as they would like him to be. They want him out. They have decided that he needs to go. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened, right? They have decided that he needs to go. And I think they're going to find a way for that to happen. Now, I think it's up to his supporters to really stop throwing in their ideology like Venezuela and China and all this other bullcrap. Focus on the numbers and the statistics, the mathematical calculations, the tangibles that you can get. And I think if people make noise, that could be a thing. And I think a lot of people on the left need to step aside and literally understand that this is an issue that's going to affect you. The next time you want a progressive candidate, they're not going to win either, because this is what the both sides do to whoever, depending on what team they're cheering for at that moment.
It's did you want to say something, Kelley, or you want me to just go ahead?
Go ahead. I'll
It's funny because I started laughing because I'm thinking about Sidney Powell, and what a character, huh? And how many things she's been involved with and whatnot. I mean, she was just such a bright spot on the whole George Flynn, the Flynn situation, right? General Flynn situation, and really exposing that stuff and declassifying information so that we could really find out a lot about Obamagate and Russiagate and the whole 9 yards and the motives behind it, whatnot. And what they did to Flynn was just awful and stuff. So I thought it was just so great that she was there. But then all of a sudden she starts popping up with the whole Anthony Weiner laptop, so all the QAnon people love her. She talks about the Anthony Weiner laptop. They need to get that to somebody in the military. Even the hardest crime investigators looked at this laptop and threw up. So now all the QAnon conspiracy people are out there mentioning her name, which kind of, once again, she might lose some credibility. But then she comes along, and everything she's saying right now, she's saying so much more than anybody's even said, even though for people like us who understand election integrity issues, for one, what Fiorella said about the whole Dominion, where it comes from in Venezuela, and it was used for Hugo Chavez, and parts are coming from China, and all that BS, because that shouldn't be that should be irrelevant, because we know, and I asked Benny Smith today, all the systems, she talks about Texas was smart to throw Dominion out of there. Yeah, but ES&S, HART, GEMS, all the other ones, 99% of our tabulation machines can run these algorithmic problems, these issues, and put them in their programs and put them in there and swing an election, give an awaited election. So I would like to see her even go a little bit further and talk about this is how we fix it. We have to have it open source. You folks are paying for it. You should see what's going on. We got to remove the black box and talk about it that way. But I mean, what she is talking about, though, we understood that Smartmatic was all the way back in Venezuela. We couldn't find the connections after that. I always assumed it was like the Guaido-ish kind of side of people in Venezuela. But I mean, that's another thing people have to talk about. The ownership of all these companies, not only is their software proprietary, but their ownership is proprietary. And that goes for these paper companies that make our absentee ballots and mail-in ballots too as well. So even though Sidney Powell, like I said, it's like a fictional novel, a fictional novella novel all in one, if you pay attention to all facets of it. But yes, happy to see her coming to this point and saying those things. In fact, a friend of mine, and she's from across seas, she says, what's a Kraken? And what is Sidney Powell going to release when she releases the Kraken? And I said, I don't know what the Kraken is, but I'm waiting to see what the Kraken is going to be released. So I am thankful for the language she's using. And like Fiorella said, she said election rigging, election fraud instead of voter fraud. She did it twice to make sure that people understand this is what we got to call it. Because when you say election fraud, you put the eyes where they need to go, on the legislation, on the establishment, whoever's doing this. This is not the individual voter. This is the election fraud. You know what I'm saying? It's a group of people committing fraud. So I am glad, and I'm glad what she's talking about. And, you know, people just got to start digging even more, because the framework itself is what we have to attack, and we have to change the framework of our elections. So Sidney Powell gets a B plus. I'd like to see an A+ on our next one. And I do hope these court cases kind of do move forward, because we need to still, we have a lot of work to change this, because my fear is if it gets through, Biden's there, nothing will change. We'll go backwards once again when it comes to our elections.
Right. Now, did you guys, this was the biggest shocker to me of all. Did you guys cover any of what had happened in Michigan with the dead? It was one particular story that I happened to catch about the dead people voting. Did you catch this story? You probably did. So yeah. I was stunned, because I've gone around repeating this, saying that that doesn't happen, basically, that's nearly non-existent, right? So I just happened upon, I don't even remember how I found it. I wasn't following this guy. It was a right-wing Twitter, YouTube guy. I think it's something Fleckus. And somehow I landed there, and I saw this post, and it said, try it for yourself. And did you guys do this, where you log in? And there's this guy, William Bradley, who was born in 1902 and died in 1984. And sure enough, you can see it right there. It's a legitimate Michigan government site. And it said that someone had requested the ballot and someone had turned it back in. Now, it caught the attention of the New York Times, and they, were going back and forth, and they said, well, there's no proof that, this was just a rare thing. And there's no proof that that vote was counted. Well, then he kept going and uncovered that it wasn't just one William Bradley, it was thousands of them. And I was just stunned, because I had believed, like, this part of election fraud, this thing didn't ever really happen. That's what I've been parroting it myself. And to see it was just shocking. And I thought, okay, well, even if they do catch that and these aren't counted, who is sending these out? And why is this happening? And it was a big eye opener for me. So I don't know if you.
Yeah, I just don't think it happens like, okay, it does happen. That's the thing. It does happen. It's happened for years. The thing is, it's always been blamed by the right, like on individuals. And I frankly don't think it's individuals doing that. I don't think it ever was. I think it's people with a vested interest in certain political outcomes. Like a lot of the times it is the right, but this time it's the Democrats. Both, like we said, it depends on which gangster you're supporting. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, this is my district. That's yours. You stay out of this one and that one. That's how it is. And people need to take out the left versus right from that, because both parties do it. And the reason that we didn't like spend too much time on that is because we wanted to like figure out how these people got a hold of these names, like, and how they were able to, make sure that the vote went through. But even just raising suspicions like, hey, look, here's this website and I was able to do it, this is true, should be at least looked at and not just scoffed. Because if it was the other way around, if it was Joe Biden getting cheated, we would still be saying, hey, Joe Biden's getting cheated by the right. Oh my God, they're totally doing this. Like I would still be mad. I'd be like, look, they're cheating. They're rigging this one way or the other. That's what it should be about. And the problem is we're so quick to say, oh, like this doesn't happen, because who told us? CNN told us, the New York Times told us, the mainstream media told us, and they tell it so many times that you start believing it. And also it's muddled with a lot of misinformation. Like the fact is it happens. It's just not, it's not Joe and Jill going to the polls and really doing this because they want their dead grandpa to vote. It's other people behind the scenes doing this. And this is why people don't vote, because 60% of Americans, and this is from Ronald Klain himself, who was referenced the Vox article in 2014, where 60% of Americans believe our elections are rigged. So that Americans don't just believe that because out of nowhere. They believe it because they see what's going on. People just don't know what to do about it.
Right.
Yep. I think that once again, that leads us, all roads lead back to Rome, right? Like, once again, we have to fix the system. It does happen. It does happen on occasions and whatnot. And I don't believe it's the individuals, but this is what you get when you have a system that allows for ballot harvesting, and therefore,
There's no tracking.
I mean, there's no tracking on these ballots. So for instance, a lot of people don't even understand where these ballots are mailed out from. So in this particular case, when you shotgun all these mail-in ballots, which is just an awful idea from the get-go. I mean, you're just everybody whose name is on that list, is on that roll, is going to get a ballot. Well, where are they sent out from? And then if they're returned, where do they go back to? And then once they go back to that place, can they not be handed out to nefarious people who are going to take them in and just walk them in? I mean, if I get back from Los Angeles 10,000 ballots that didn't reach its destination, people died, they're not there, and I give them to somebody who's a friendly person because he kicks me some money, you or me or Joanne can walk these ballots in ourselves because it's legal. You know what I'm saying? And there's also some things to realize as well, Kelley, that I just learned, and I learned this from a right wing, I don't want to say a right wing, but a person who leans slightly to the right, and she runs a election integrity group. She says that a lot of that, sometimes she tries not to concentrate on those things, because back in the days, in the 70s and sometimes the 80s, you didn't need your date of birth to vote. You needed other information. So they just logged them into the computer as 1900, 1900, 1900, 1900. Yeah. And if they remake one of those ballots, they go in 1900. And the reason why she pointed that out is because she wants the right to get focused on the issues that need to get focused on, because it could be a distraction. Does it happen? Yes. But once again, we have to have a system that fixes this. And the Democrats, they never wanted this fixed, just like the Republicans never wanted this fixed, because they both wanted to manipulate elections in their own cartel areas to their best knowledge. So that's why you have systems like this that is so chaotic that people just accept the results because they can't even start to look where the rabbit hole begins and where it ends.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be, I live in South Jersey, and I live across the river from Philadelphia, and there are some pretty corrupt political machines around here, and they've been here for my whole life, right? So I was talking about this before. I say I've developed a tolerance for it. Well, no, I hate it, right? But there's a difference between petty corruption and then the systemic corruption, which that's what we're talking about, right? But yeah, I mean, you can organize armies of people to, like, that work for the county or their unions or whatever. I mean, they'll organize and they'll do things like that. They will, and some of them will probably just do it on their own too, because whatever, they're zealous.
Yeah.
They're zealous. But I think this is maybe, and I want to check with you first, Kelley, this is maybe a good time to roll into that bonus question, because we're getting into the the systemic nature of it and all. But I do think that the voting systems are the elephant in the room. But I agree with Fiorella that it's still important to bring these stories out about what happens, just to remind everybody, and just to, I don't know, I guess it's a PR type thing, something I'm not very good at, but these things do need to be pointed out. And because whatever, it always happens where the elections are like a sports game, and everybody's just a red team, blue team thing. And then when it's over, the issue of the election systems just goes off everyone's radar and no one wants to talk about it. And then the elections start to get close and they're like, why didn't somebody do something about this? Well, it's because we're so burnt out by the end of these elections. We're like, just make it stop, just make it stop.
Make it stop.
Yeah.
Make it stop, please.
Yeah.
I agree completely. It's the machines that we need to focus on. That, my story was just one example of something that, I had believed that this never happened, and there it was. So it was just shocking for me. But,
Kelley, can I tell you something? It definitely, I firmly believe, and from my family's telling me stories, and I'm going to probably tell the story on Slow News Day this Sunday, that they did swing an election, Kennedy versus Nixon, by dead people. They used dead people to push him over the top when it came into Illinois, because his daddy, Jack Kennedy, made deals with the mob that his son would get them back Cuba and all the casinos. And then it also happened in Texas, where Lyndon Baines Johnson were, where they used a mail-in system to vote for a bunch of dead people to put Kennedy over the top. I firmly believe that. Once again, I'm just saying that it's a little bit fabricated nowadays. However, ballots go out, people are deceased, they come back, they end up in the wrong hands, if it's ballot harvesters or people from the establishment that can turn those ballots in. I believe the major amounts of votes that were actual people who lived but didn't vote were people who moved, and their ballot just was loosey-goosey. And those people who moved, I mean, if people went and checked, to be like, what the hell, I voted in Philadelphia over here, I moved to Maine 3 months ago, 4 years ago, whatever, because I was getting calls in Florida and I voted in 2016. And I know, I was getting calls, and I'm sure my old roommate, if I call him now and say, hey man, did a ballot come for me? He was an establishment Democrat. He probably voted for me for Joe Biden in Florida. Who knows? But I mean, it does happen. So,
Yeah.
So the question is, what do we do about it? I think that's where we have to uncover as much as we can, but we have to start talking about solutions. And I don't know if that is to maybe get candidates band together behind this issue, get people maybe behind one solution, if that's possible. Because what I've seen, and there are a lot of very smart people that have been working in this for decades, and like we talked about, there's some controversy of them being they're not nonpartisan, but these machines can keep everybody busy for another 20 years trying to figure out how in the hell they work, trying to figure out that black box. We're just spinning our wheels. So I think it's time we go to the top, find out how these decisions are being made, the secretaries of state, and start putting pressure there about bringing change. Because otherwise I don't know what we're doing. It's not fixing it. So what do you guys think?
You want to go first?
Well, I just think that it's so much deeper than the secretaries of state. I mean, the secretaries of state control the elections in their individual counties. And then there's the board of supervisors here. We have those people, but who do they serve? Right? They're serving a political establishment. They're serving the Democratic Party here in California, because the California Democratic Party is extremely powerful. We are the 5th largest economy. We have one of the largest counties here in LA County, and we have seen and witnessed how they manipulate information, how they offer zero transparency when it comes to the elections. And they are simultaneously, I mean, our Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, was out fundraising for Hillary Clinton in 2016 while being the Secretary of State here. And you saw how those elections went in 2016. And again, he was a Biden supporter this time around. That if we want to change that, all they're going to do is say, oh, we're going to have CISA come in and all these election integrity groups from the government come in, and they're saying there's no fraud here. So that's it. We everything's great. This is the most democratic election and the most secure election in history, according to Nancy Pelosi. So it's not going to do us any good to really expect the government to do any cleaning up, because that's like expecting bank robbers to hold themselves accountable. They're the ones doing this. So what it has to come from people demanding it. And unfortunately, people still believe in the system. So the number one thing I think we have to do is dismantle the idea that a democracy exists, because the democracy hasn't existed in a long time. It didn't start with this election. It won't end with this election. It's been going for a long time. This is why we have Donald Trump as president, because people were sick and tired of the status quo politicians, types like Obama. With this Joe Biden, presidency that seems to be coming on, we're going backwards instead of forwards. We're going back into the same mechanisms that created and led to Donald Trump. So that is unfortunate, but that is three giant steps back for our movement and for anything that we wanted to do. So we need to really, first of all, kind of shake people awake into what this is, because once they realize how bad it is and how insurmountable it seems that what we're facing, and once we get the right and the left to stop fighting each other, you can fight each other later. Right now, realize that you're being screwed by these two people who, Kamala Harris is fist bumping Lindsey Graham. I mean, you do realize, like, they're friends. They go home and they hang out. Their kids go to the same schools. They're all the elites. They go to each other's weddings. We know this. So once you figure out that your fight isn't with a Trump supporter, that your fight isn't with somebody of the opposite ideology, that your fight is with the oligarchy, that's what they're afraid of. But now what they want to manufacture is a civil war. This is why they thrive off of people going and making fun of Trump supporters and doing all of this and calling every single person that disagrees with them a Nazi, because that it gets you right where they want you. Like, that's what they want. And so if they continue that, we're lost. So what we have to do as truth tellers is continue talking about this and badger people, be like, hey, grow a spine. I don't care if you're scared. You need to talk about this crap. Yes, it's going to get you a lot of backlash. Yes, it's going to get you a lot of heat, but we really need to make election integrity the number one issue, because there's a reason why, even though 60% of Americans want a type of Green New Deal, Medicare for all, they want to end wars, we have the vast majority of people in government who don't want that. How did those people get in there? Obviously, we didn't elect them. So that's what we have to make people see. We have to make them aware that there's a problem in the first place.
Right.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah. Solutions, they're there, right? I mean, really, to tell you the truth, the election integrity activists, all of us, even the people we disagree with, they're all there. We can have a system in play right away. We can have an open source system. There's a guy by the name of Alan Deckert, who's one of the godfathers of the whole situation system. He can put that in. Guys like Benny Smith can oversee that. We can have a hand counted audit on film, on TV, streaming live, where it's casted. It should be counted. We can get Breaky's whole technology where he wants to put the actual digital images on the web so people can see them. I mean, we can have that right there, have an open source system for our mail-in with David Weber, who's actually tested it in Virginia, and have it work, eliminate the paper companies if we want and stuff, and then have guys like me and Fiorella, and people like us, which I want to do is I want to run the whole voting system, like almost like an Apple store, like people in a nice shirt. How you doing? Come on in, direct them in there, get them in and out, make it efficient. There's a guy, Clint Curtis, who talks, he's all the open source and back in the days. He talks about, well, what we should do is we should implement the law that for every extra hour you stay at a polling place longer than 60 minutes, the county has to pay you $100. So if you're there for 3 hours, the county owes you $200. If you're there for 4 hours, the county owes you $300. They'll straighten out their shit fast. And I know from running restaurants, a guy like me can really go in there, get your aces in places, make it a mellifluous thing, make it fun, make it fast, make it awesome, fix the whole thing. But we obviously know that people don't want it fixed. And that's why we really don't have a democracy. And this is where I differ from my partner a little bit. Where I kind of agree with her in a little bit. Usually I'm that kind of guy like, I don't know if we should break the system. Let's just fix what we need to fix and whatnot. But when it talks about the people who are making sure that this system stay in play, I don't even believe that their true identity and faces have been revealed. Who are they working for? Who above them is making them put all these mechanisms in there to keep control of everything? I often say that I'm a vegan because I am right now, but I would eat the rich. And I don't know if it's going to take some situation like that where we got to braise, stew, or double boil somebody to let these elites know that we're not going to take their shit anymore. Our Constitution was written so we could have power. You know what I'm saying? They've used the flexibility so they can maintain their power. We got to take it back, and we have to get these elections straight. And that guy, Clint Curtis, he says, listen, all the activists got to pause on what they're doing for a second and be an activist for election transparency. You got to stop saving the whales for a little bit. You got to stop the no fracking thing. You got to stop everything right now. concentrate on this, and because until we kick this in the butt, none of those issues will ever be properly addressed. Only the elites' issues will be addressed, because our lawmakers are simply not elected. They're selected. And that is the biggest problem.
Yep.
Thanks for listening. Special thanks to Fiorella Isabel and Craig Pasta Jardula. Follow them on Twitter at the Convo Couch, at Fiorella_IM, and at YoPasta. Find their show on YouTube, Rockfin, and Patreon. This podcast is independent media. Listener support's important. Patreon.com/AroundTheEmpire. PayPal.me/AroundTheEmpirePod. You can find it on any mobile podcast app, on the website AroundTheEmpire.com, on Patreon, or on YouTube. Listening on YouTube, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also follow on Twitter at AroundTheEmpire, and we'll see you next time. Take good care, everybody.